What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for being patient while I've been away. I've had a few personal things in my life going on that have kept me from really sitting down and doing what I love. So I am back. We are here with a new illustration. If you are unfamiliar with this car, I highly recommend you check out the YouTube channel juiceboxforyou, and you will see this Laurel that belongs to Ruben Dover of that channel, and they're a bunch of guys based in Ireland, and they are quite possibly my favorite YouTube channel on the platform currently and have been for quite some time. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that this isn't the only car from that channel that I have drawn, so you will see another car from that channel in the near future on this channel. So let's go ahead and get started. So, like normal, we are going to start with keeping our background layer, and we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call this layer the main shape. This is basically going to just be the main outline of the car. I keep this main shape on its own layer to turn it on and off as a reference as I draw. So using the pen tool, we're going to make a click to create an anchor point, click and drag to create more anchor points to follow the line of the car around the main shape as we go along. And again, I'm speeding this up, I don't know, probably 1200%, so it's really, really fast. If you'd like me to go a little bit slower, or if you need some help with the pen tool, go back and check out one of my videos on the blue BMW, where I dedicate a whole video to making this first initial outline of the car. So basically, we're just kind of clicking and dragging, creating those anchor points, and there we have it, a basic outline of the car. So I've had a lot of questions personally through Instagram and through YouTube about how I choose my color palette. So what I do is I usually just create several boxes kind of off to the side, and I'll use my eyedropper tool, which is I on your keyboard, to kind of go over certain parts of the car that tend to have the colors that I think I'm going to be using. Again, this is kind of just to get started, and the further along the illustration progresses, I alter these colors. So this is just kind of a starting point. But again, having these extra shapes off to the outside of the car, so that I don't necessarily have to start filling in color on the actual illustration right away. And sometimes I'll use 4 to 5 different squares, but on this one, with all of the livery, I think I have 8 to 10 or something like that. So I'm just going through, grabbing some colors. You can see there I'm selecting some kind of blues and dark colors that are part of the black, which aren't true black. And then I go through and I'm selecting some areas of the red part of the livery here. Some bright areas, some really dark areas. And I'm just kind of seeing what kind of color samples that the eyedropper tool is picking up. And I feel like if I need more, that's when I'll copy and paste these squares to just try to get a broader range of colors to start with. So I'm just kind of going all over different parts of the illustration and getting a variant of colors. So we're going to create a new layer, and I'm going to copy all of those squares and actually put them on the background layer. So that way when I turn that on and off, I actually only see the illustration, and the image along with all of these colors kind of go away at the same time. So we're going to lock that layer, make sure we don't mess it up. And then on this main shape, I'm going to take this path, this single path of the outline, and we're going to duplicate it. I'm going to select it. I'm going to assign it a bulk color here so I can kind of see it there in my layers palette. Kind of use that eyedropper tool to pick up some color. Now I'm going to kind of move it off to make sure I have the shape that I want selected. And then I'm going to duplicate that shape. And then I'm going to bring it up to use paste in place so that I don't have to worry about it being off-centered. Lock the main shape layer because we won't be using that. That'll be the only path on that layer. And so now we have the same shape on two different layers. And that's mainly so I usually just keep a main shape on the second layer that I create, and I can always go back and reference that while I build other highlights and shadows on the other layers so that I'm not losing that main shape at the bottom of a layer that might have hundreds of paths on top of it. And knowing this car, knowing the livery and all the stickers, I know that I'm going to start drawing hundreds and hundreds of paths, and I don't want to lose this main shape. So that's kind of why I create that. It's just preference based. Nobody taught me how to do that or anything. It's basically just preference. So here I'm just kind of finishing up getting organized. I want to keep this layer locked. And now we can move on to the second layer, or the third layer, sorry. So here you see I've assigned the stroke of this car a bright yellow color so that it stands out against everything else. There's no yellow anywhere else. And that way I know where to reference. So let's go ahead and start on the third layer we created, which I've titled Black. And we're going to start drawing just basic shapes that'll make up the black part of this car. And again, there will be highlights and shadows that go on these main shapes. So that's why you're not seeing me perfect the shape itself, because the red will eventually be layered on top of this. Pretty similarly to how you would actually put the vinyl on the car itself. This car started off as a black car and the red vinyl was layered on top. So I'm kind of drawing it almost the same way as you would put the livery on. All right, so we're just kind of going through and getting the basic shapes. Again, I'm not trying to be too perfect here, because I know that the windshield is eventually going to go on top of this shape. The windows and trim layers are eventually going to go on top of this shape. This is just the base, the bottom of the illustration. So now you can see that I've started to get a couple of shapes drawn. Now let's get the hood. And the hood will be tricky because there will be multiple layers on top of that as well. So we want a little bit more of a blue for that. And so again, you can see here how I'm not being too perfect on getting these black stripes, because again, I can kind of cover those mistakes with the red, so to speak, since that'll be the next layer we do. And again, this is all using the pen tool. All right. So now we have kind of the black base kind of set and ready to go. And that looks pretty good. It's actually starting to look like a car already, so that's always a bonus. I'm just kind of going over here. I'm, taking a moment to look and make sure that nothing seems completely out of place or wonky. Now I'm going to go through, maybe adjust a few colors and add some highlights. All right, so now let's go ahead and create a new layer. And I'm actually this layer is going to be the red. So I'm going to go back and relabel the main shape color as yellow, I believe, because that was the color of the stroke that I chose for that shape. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we've got our black layer, which we just drew. Let's go ahead and label that black. And then this will be red. So we'll go through and choose a color for that, and then we will name this layer red. So now you can kind of see that the colors that correspond with the actual illustration also correspond with the colors in my layers palette. And this is just to help be easily identifiable as this illustration grows and grows. So now let's just go ahead and start drawing on the red stripes. And we can worry about, defining where the highlights and the shadows are a little later. The main goal now is to just get the shapes themselves drawn so that we have points of reference, like kind of where it dips in on the body there. Those will be points of reference. So as long as we get the main bulk of the shapes done, we'll be good to go when it comes time to add the highlights and the shadows. And similarly, like we did to the Ferrari illustration, we're not going to be using solid color for the highlights and the shadows. We're basically going to be using whites and blacks and a variant of blending modes and opacities to showcase whether it's a highlight or a shadow. All right, so taking a peek at that, it's already really starting to come together, and we haven't really done that much. We've got a main shape. We've started drawing a couple different layers of black and a couple different layers or a couple different paths of red. So let's just keep going. You can see how those don't really line up. So I'm actually just going to adjust this shape here using the white arrow tool, or A on your keyboard, to just bring that shape all the way back. All right, now we wrap up the red, and you can see that as I go along with the pen tool real zoomed in, I kind of stay underneath that stroke. That way you don't have to be exact, because on top of it is the main shape that has the stroke. Okay, so you can see we've created another new layer now that we have finished with the red and the black, and we are going to call this the highlights layer. So this is where we will start to build some different layers of white using different blending modes to create lighter or darker areas. Now simultaneously here, I'm also creating another layer, and we're going to call this the body lines. Now, before we jump to highlights, I generally like to go through and use a black stroke to highlight all of the body lines of the vehicle. So the gas tank door and where the doors lay. And this pretty much helps use these as points of reference. I mean, they're important parts of the illustration, no doubt, but they are also used as points of reference while drawing the highlights and the shadows. Otherwise, it's just kind of solid color, and you can end up doing a lot of guessing. So by drawing these obvious body lines really helps kind of outline where your next shapes will fall. All right, so now that I've selected all of those and made them consistent, the same color and the same stroke width, I can turn everything back on. I'm going to bump up this stroke here because it's kind of a gap. And I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to add a few more that we might have missed. And then let's change that name of that layer to shading instead of highlights. And then now we can start adding in some of the shading and shadows and stuff like that. So let's just pick a generic kind of gray color. And now we're actually going to zoom in. I'm going to open up the transparency dialog box here, and we're going to change the blending mode to multiply. And then I'm going to turn the opacity down a little bit. So now I can see those black and white shapes, or black and red shapes that we drew earlier. But now we can kind of see through them, and with the blending mode of multiply, really kind of gives you that appeal or appearance of a shadow that's being cast by the body line changing. So we'll be using this transparency dialog box a little bit more. Now we can go back to the black layer and select a couple of those shadow shapes that we drew earlier and change their opacity as well. Okay, so I'm obviously really zoomed in here because it's kind of dark, it's kind of hard to see, and now we've added the red for the front bumper. So now I'll take another shape and I'll draw out the cutout for where you can see the intercooler. And once we're done with that shape, we'll select both the front bumper and that shape. We'll go to the Pathfinder dialog box and select minus front. Now we just have one shape instead of, you know, like the front bumper shape with a bunch of cutouts before, you know, on top of it. So we're essentially removing that last shape that we drew so that we can see through the front bumper later when we go to draw the intercooler. Okay, so I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but now we're going to get back to the shading layer. So now we're using our pen tool, just adding a couple of more shapes, and then using the different colors, so kind of a light gray, and then going back to that transparency dialog box, changing the blending mode, and changing the opacity of those shapes so you can see through them. So here I'm just trying all different kinds. I even forget to this day what each one does, so I like to select that shape, go through each different blending mode, and see what looks the best. So here it looks like normal's actually going to be the good one, and then we're just going to turn the transparency down a little bit. So that actually, I shortened that shape because the sticker is going to go on top of it. So there's no reason to make sure that it's perfect. You can't even see where that shape would end anyway because there is a big Advan sticker on top of it. So this car was kind of difficult basically because it is sitting in the sunset on racetrack, and so you have a lot of variance of color. You have a lot of hard sunspots, which is kind of what we're drawing now. So you have a lot of highlights and shadows. You have a lot going on with the livery and a lot going on with all of the stickers. So I apologize in advance if I kind of jump around. Sometimes I'll see a spot and I'll be like, oh, I want to draw that next. And so I'll get to draw that part. And then I'm also thinking about what's going to go on last. So just similarly to how you would, you know, when you're applying, you know, the stickers and stuff, like, so all of these white stickers will go on last, which is why we're not worrying about that now. So you see I'm kind of just drawing these areas where the sun is hitting. And sometimes, you know, using your creative freedom. I didn't really like the way that looked. So I did a bunch of undos. And we're just going to keep it as simple as possible. The more you try to complicate it, the more it doesn't look realistic later on down the road. So same thing, back to the transparency dialog box, going through different blending modes, seeing if anything stands out to me. Color dodge actually looked okay there, and turning the opacity down to about 40%. Going back through shapes, adjusting the color, turning up a little bit more of the yellow in that color, just so that it really looks like it's sitting in that sunset. And then we'll just kind of repeat that same process for a couple of the other shapes that are relatively similar to the last shape that we drew. And that's basically because Illustrator kind of hangs on to those parameters that you last used. So if I want to do something that is along the same lines of the shape that I just drew prior, then I'm going to choose an area of the car that kind of has the same, color tones and highlights, and pick up like the same kind of parameters. That way it's less work that I have to do, or remember, what was the transparency there? What was the color, the blending mode there? So that's why I go back through and just kind of jump around. Okay, so there's a highlight on top of this shape, and I'm just going to use a stroke to accentuate that. All right, so this front fender has been a little bit of a tricky spot for me. So let's try to do this front area again. You've got a reflection here that is kind of wonky. We're going to try to draw it as spot on as possible, but at the same time not being, too literal. And again, using those body lines that we drew earlier, I can just kind of bump up to where that fender cutout is. And I know that since the body lines will be on top of that, I don't have to get that shape exactly perfect behind there. So now it might start to look a little weird, but believe me, in the end, it'll all look like it goes together. So even when you get to a point where you take a step back and look at your art and see it's looking a little weird, I can assure you that just kind of keep going, and towards the end, it's either going to come together and look great, or it's going to continue to look weird and you'll just end up deleting it, which is no big deal in the end. So I'm getting close to finishing some of these highlights. So again, choosing similar areas here, drawing the shape, and then choosing different blending modes. I'm really liking color dodge on top of this red, and then just playing with different levels of opacity to kind of see through this kind of cream yellow color that I've got going on, and then really turning that blending mode down, or that opacity down, to even 10%. So it just looks a little different than that main bright red that we chose in the beginning. And another thing that you can do, like I'm about to do right now, is you can even, since we're playing with blending modes and playing with opacities, you can even layer the highlights on top of one another. Some people draw, when they draw using Illustrator, all of their paths tend to line up and touch each other, and nothing technically layers over another. I've actually never really used Illustrator in that manner before. I've always layered different paths or different shapes on top of one another. I've hidden shapes behind other shapes to get the desired look that I want. So here, this shape that I'm drawing now is a relatively large shape, but it's going to have an opacity that's, turned down a little bit. But that way I can really see that this car is sitting in a sunset, because the red almost turns to kind of an orange there on the back quarter panel. All right, so jumping back around again, my apologies. Let's go to the hood, since we're still kind of working with some of these faded reds, and let's draw the big Advan sticker on the hood. Again, I know it's a little hard to see. It was hard for me to see, which is why you see me, zooming way in to try to get the sticker right. And you can see you kind of can't see everything. So I'm just kind of guessing, but at the same time, I know what the logo itself looks like. A good thing to do if you have like a second monitor or something is pull up what the actual logo looks like as you're drawing it, as another point of reference if you're unfamiliar. Okay, so going back to that color palette that I chose from the beginning, I'm going to choose one of those muted faded reds and going through the different blending modes and different opacities to choose kind of the right look, because you can see it, but it's so faded that you can't see it, so it's kind of tricky. Okay, so now let's put the front bumper on its own layer. Originally it was on the red layer, so I'm renaming this layer Red Stripes, and then the new layer we're going to call front bumper. And this way I can just, kind of concentrate all of the different shadows and highlights that are going to go on this front bumper. So since we've been working with highlights, let's go ahead and stay in that same frame of mind and start drawing some of the highlights that will be part of this front bumper. So as you can see over on my layers palette, I have the layers that I'm not working on locked. One of my favorite things to do is start drawing on a layer that is the incorrect layer. All right, so you can see I moved that main shape down, and we're going to change the color of the front bumper really, really dark, since that's a majority of the color of this bumper, and because it's in the shade. And then we will draw our brighter red on top of the darker red. And again, I'm using the main shape to kind of hide behind that stroke so that my shape doesn't have to be perfect. All right, and that looks really good. So now that we know we have kind of the two main, the hot part and the cool part of the front bumper done, and now it's really starting to look like a car. Okay, so now that we've established the front bumper a little better with that dark red and that light red, now I'm going to go through on the front bumper layer and start drawing several shapes to essentially pick out the highlights. So I've even used the eyedropper tool there to go back to that kind of light yellow, light cream kind of color and pick that color up. Okay, so now we're going to draw a couple of darker parts. Again, going through and using the eyedropper tool to select some of those darker reds that we picked up from earlier. Okay, and again, Pathfinder tool here, selecting both shapes, and then using that minus front to essentially erase the shape that you draw on top. So now we're starting to see some definition in the front bumper, and we can even go back through and add a few more highlights to kind of cover up that weird wonky area. And then using the white arrow tool to make some fine-tune adjustments. So we'll go through here using the white arrow tool, make sure everything kind of lines up and nothing looks, completely out of place. Sometimes you have to really, really zoom in far to see what you're doing. And again, it's also kind of good while you're going through and you're this far zoomed in to kind of go through, and fix any other, strange shapes or strange things that you've drawn by using that white arrow tool to kind of fill in or fix weird areas. So moving on, using the eyedropper tool to select that same highlight that's on the other side of the front bumper, we can kind of pick up the same qualities that were in the shape that we drew before. So just want to draw a couple more of these highlights. Even though they're so tiny and so minute, they really do bring the illustration to life. And again, this is completely up to your creative freedom. If you don't want to get that involved or that detailed, that's totally fine. I was actually trying to be as detailed as possible on this drawing because I'm a huge fan of the channel juiceboxforyou, and I really wanted to impress Ruben with the illustration of his car, and he was. It was really cool being in the States and being able to talk to these guys in Ireland, across the planet about cars is really fun. And it means a lot too when, somebody has put this much work into the car itself, and they have a really good relationship with this car. To see somebody else kind of take almost the same care into creating a piece of art for that car as well, to showcase, one of the best times. This car is actually photographed at Gapville, which was an event that Ruben had been looking forward to going to for quite some time, and he had eventually made it. So being able to choose this image and kind of highlight that moment in time for him meant a lot for me as a fan of the car. Okay, so let's create one more layer before we end this video, and we're going to call this the intercooler layer, and we're going to draw the intercooler, and it is going to basically live underneath of the front bumper layer in that cutout. So here I'm just copying and pasting a long rectangle shape. We'll select all of those, and then we're going to align those equally spaced apart. And we're going to draw another darker shape off to the side. These shapes don't have to be perfect because, again, we're going to drag this layer underneath of the red, the front bumper layer momentarily. Okay, so that looks okay. Now we're going to draw a big shadow. Now you can see over here on the layers palette, we're going to take that path and drag that to the bottom. And that's going to be kind of the background of the intercooler layer. And then we're going to take the entire intercooler layer and drag that underneath the front bumper. And then it's looking believable enough. So I'm going to turn everything off. And now I'm going to draw a shadow for the intercooler. This actually doesn't exist perfectly, but we're just going to make a nice arc. And again, we're going to assign a very dark color to this. This doesn't have to be perfect since it hides behind the front bumper layer. We're going to use the transparency dialog box to select the blending mode of multiply. And then we're going to turn the opacity down to about 60% or so. 68, that looks good. You can still see through it, and you can still tell that it is now a shadow being cast by the front bumper on the intercooler. And as we back out and we look at what we've drawn so far, I'd say that looks pretty good. It's really starting to look like a car. The livery looks pretty good. The stripes look pretty good. If you're familiar with Advan cars, then you know that it's kind of on point. It looks like it's sitting in the sunset. The front bumper is definitely in the shade. The intercooler is tucked nicely behind it. And we now have a platform that we can really build off of moving forward. So, windows, windshield, wheels and tires. Headlights are going to be tricky on this one. I have a little trick up my sleeve that I'd like to share with you guys a little later. And the wheels on this car are going to be quite awesome. They're going to be quite detailed, very similar to the blue BMW we drew at the start of this channel. So thanks again for being so patient while I took a little bit of time off to handle some personal parts of my life. If you follow me on Instagram, then you know what's going on. I encourage you to head over to Instagram to keep up with me there, even though I've been a little quiet there lately too. But I'm starting to get back into it now that life is settling down. So, as always, thanks for watching and hitting that like button. If you're interested in more Adobe Illustrator CC tutorials and other car-related nonsense, consider subscribing and hitting that bell. Also, be sure to check out the Instagram and Patreon pages, which are linked below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace!